Hello and welcome. My name is Jim Berg. I am Executive Director of the LGBTQ Leaders in Higher Education, a membership organization dedicated to promoting and supporting leaders in higher education who come from the LGBTQ community. Um, you may know our main activity is a leadership institute held every fall. This year we're meeting in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, October 14th, 15th, and 16th. So if you want information about that, we can talk about that later, or you can go to our website, which is here, www.lgbtqleaders.net. Today, we're going to talk about a new program that we have that we're calling Virtual Mentoring Circles. And it's our attempt to be able to do something that we've done only in person before, which is mentor rising leaders around the country. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that program, talk about the importance of mentoring, share some of our stories about mentoring, and then have a lot of Q&A. Since it's a smallish group, we should have you can raise your hand or you can chime in at some point, and we'll handle it that way. So I'd like to introduce the president of the board of the LGBTQ Leaders in Higher Education, Kristin Esterberg, who is also chancellor at University of Washington in Bothell, as you can tell from her banner behind her.
Yeah. Well, good morning from the West Coast. Good afternoon for all of you in other time zones. The W is actually Washington. It is not Wisconsin. Welcome. We're really glad you're here today. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about why mentoring is important. And it seems a sort of silly thing to start with because you're here. You probably already also think that mentoring is important. But I think, for most of us who are out as queer leaders in our organizations, most of the time we're the only one or the only one in our role. And while we might have, for example, on my campus, we do have a network of queer identified staff and faculty. Typically, you're the only person in that role. I currently serve as chancellor at the University of Washington, Bothell. So clearly I'm the only one in that role. And so the goal really is to try and bring us together to really talk about the challenges, the joys, the opportunities, and to provide some mutual support for wherever we are, in our particular professional trajectory or in our own leadership path. Historically, we've offered mentoring sessions each year at our institute, and they've typically been like a half an hour or an hour. And what we've learned from participants is that doesn't feel like enough, right? It's sort of like you get your toe in, you start to create a relationship, and then the institute's over. Maybe we continue, maybe not. But what our participants have found valuable is the opportunity to connect with others who are in a similar role or others who are, maybe in a different place in their career, and can offer some advice, help, or frankly, just some camaraderie. So that's why we looked at establishing this particular mentoring program. We wanted to expand it throughout the year so that it wasn't just once a year at the Institute, but we also wanted to bring folks together either at similar levels of the organization or in similar whether you're in academic affairs, for example, or student affairs, just to bring folks together so that we could begin to create community and some greater support for folks throughout. So that's a little bit about why we created this program and why we're holding this webinar today. So I think with that, Kirby, I'm going to pass it over to you to talk a little bit more about the structure.
Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Kirby Knipp. I am the program coordinator for the organization. I'm happy to be here today. I reside in normally sunny San Diego. Today it's quite cloudy and rainy, which is not the norm. So thank you all so much for being here. I think what we wanted to cover today is more of the, obviously the need for this and why folks might be interested, but also just the true structure of the program and how this would work. I am going to put into the chat our mentoring website. it might be helpful to just kind of go along with that as we go through. I'll also, if I have access, I'm going to request screen sharing, go through that. So what we wanted to do was create a program that would allow for opportunities for both mentors and mentees. So we will be, searching for both of those. So whatever end you are interested in, we definitely are happy to have a conversation with you about that. This first part really just gives the background that Kristin really just went over and the importance of that, and we'll really get into the ideas that we all believe that why mentoring has been so helpful for us and transformative. And then obviously today we are in the informational webinar. But we really wanted to create this program that is guided by our values as the organization values and create something that has a little bit more legs than, that one-time interaction. And so we had discussions with people with across the organization to build this and to build this in a way that is sustainable and that's also accessible for different folks at different times of the years. It's everybody's on a different academic, personal calendar, fiscal, whatever calendar you subscribe to. So we wanted to be sure that we were creating programming that is diverse throughout the year. So we will be kicking off this summer, which is a little bit of a tight turnaround, but not too tight. So the virtual mentoring circles are going to be small. They're going to be anywhere from 5 to 6 people. They're going to be really intimate, and they will meet on Zoom anywhere from 3 to 5 times over 3 months. And they'll be about 90 minutes each. So our first cohort will begin in July. So obviously, if that's going to start in July, working backwards, we would need applications to either be the mentee or mentor, obviously a little bit sooner, which we'll get into. And then they'll continue through September. And then we'll kind of repeat that process and that schedule 3 times all the way into 2026. So we'll get into a little bit more of that timeline in a second. But, who should participate is we want to be, this program is open to all. We hope that you all can find a place where you feel that you can apply and find interest in. But we did design it for mid to senior executives at just any sort of various leadership levels. So obviously each university has its own organizational chart that we all have all different titles that mean different things. So we didn't want to be too prescriptive with that. And we wanted to also, try and form these groups around either that job responsibility, regional groupings, academic backgrounds, affinity groups. What's important to note is that we, again, didn't want to be too prescriptive with that because we wanted to kind of see the bank of applicants and see how we can partner you all together and really align those values. I know that if we have 6 people that applied, from Kansas, where I'm from, then we might want to put them together because they might be facing the same challenges and hopefully find folks that can, find community with that. So we will have our trained facilitators who is going to be a current or former senior executive, and they will go through a training to prepare for this programming that we'll get into in a second. So if you did want to apply to be a mentee, here's just some things that we would need from you. A description of your current position and responsibilities, a current CV, and the commitment. So, like I said, there's going to be 3 cohorts here that with the different dates. Excuse me, there's 4 here.
Yeah, I
And
think we need to fix that October to December one.
okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
And no, all good. So, and you'll see the dates here for each of those groups. So for the July group, just so that, Jim, myself, and the team have time to review those applications thoroughly and partner folks up, we would ask that that application be submitted by June 2nd. And there's an email here that those applications can be sent to, just the programs at the lgbtpresidents.org. We would hope to, align folks, match them, and be informed by June 16th. And then they will be required to register and pay the fee by July 3rd. As mentioned, we will try to place everyone in an appropriate group. Fees, the introductory fees for 2025 are $300 for members, $450 for non-members, and leaders with backgrounds in humanities and humanistic social sciences are particularly encouraged to apply. So before we get into mentors, any questions about the application process for mentees? Or Jim, if there's anything I missed.
No, we are, a bit ahead of our schedule, so we do have time if people want to ask questions, either raise your hand or just speak up on your mic.
We're just that thorough. And as we continue, if questions arise, obviously, we are happy to answer them. So, another part of this meeting today is to provide some context around the mentor applications, which I'm going to switch my screen here and share that application. So if you are more interested in being a mentor for these mentoring circles, we do have an application that is open. I will put the link here in the chat. And again, these are going to be guided by our principals, and obviously we'll follow the same schedule. And again, we'll align with those folks who applied to be a mentee. This application is pretty thorough. We're going to ask a lot of different questions about, your background, if you've had experience mentoring before, why you personally think mentoring is really important, kind of your take on it. And it really invites folks to start thinking about how mentoring and vulnerability can be partnered together, and just kind of start thinking in that context. There will be a required if you are a mentor, a facilitated training on June 13th. We're hoping to have all of those folks together and go through a 2-hour training so that they are prepared for, our organization's goals in this process and how they can at best be a fit for us. So obviously, like I said, these follow the same timelines as the mentees, but this application process will be closing a little bit sooner so we can get scheduling alignments correct and all sorts of that kind of housekeeping things. This will close on May 5th. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Jen, for putting that in there.
One of the questions that often comes up when we're talking about this, when we're talking about setting up a mentoring program in general, is, and this occurred when I was in my last position at a community college in New York City. Like I was talking with a very well-known faculty development person who had done a lot of work on mentoring, and I asked her, how do you train mentors? And she just flat out said, we don't train mentors. And I'm like, huh. I think that might be problematic. I think we can all imagine or maybe have experienced mentorship situations that don't really work as well as we would like them to. And this being a different model of mentoring, not the one-on-one, not the sitting at the foot of the sage kind of model. We thought it was important to work with mentors so that they have an understanding of what the different dynamics might be in a group, how to manage a group mentoring situation, which I think probably not a lot of people have done, and make sure that they're attuned to the kind of nuances that can come up in a group like that. So we've contracted with Catherine Stewart, who is a pretty well-known faculty development professional and higher ed administrator who has worked in Alabama, Arkansas, and is currently in North Carolina. So she'll be doing the training and she'll be working with us throughout the length of this program. Now, I think now is the time when we thought we could share some of our own mentoring stories. And I'm going to ask Kristin to go first because she's the bravest.
Actually, I'm going to share an experience of really awful mentoring. When I became a junior faculty member, my very, very first professor job out of graduate school, I was assigned a mentor who was in a different division. She was actually in continuing education. And every time, I think she didn't want to be a mentor. And so every time I went to meet with her, I would sit outside of her office for about a half an hour, 45 minutes. And then she would sort of, 45 minutes later or so, would bring me in for about 5 minutes. And it was really frustrating for me that I was supposed to be matched with her, and she seemed to have no interest at all in me as a, as a professor who was trying to figure out, how do I teach? How do I do my research? How do I get my feet on the ground? So that was an example of really awful mentoring. Much, much later in my career, I had the experience of really good mentoring. I was an associate provost, and I worked with a provost who I guess didn't really want to be in any room alone. And so he just brought me into all of his meetings, and literally we did everything together. And that's how I learned the role of the provost. And I don't think he thought of himself as mentoring. I think he realized, he liked company and wanted help thinking through things. He wanted to talk through things. And so truly in every single meeting, I was with him. And so that was an example of really brilliant mentoring. So I will share with you the best and the worst. And I try and channel some of the better qualities of my unintended mentor rather than the worst qualities of my intended mentor. So would love to hear other stories about good or bad or indifferent mentoring, because I think we probably all had some of those.
Well, I'll
Hey,
go. Um, I have a graduate school experience that I wanted to share, and then a professional experience. So in my graduate career, there were a couple of professors who were more than teachers to me in the classroom. I had them as classroom instructors, but then they were also models about how to be faculty members, how to be teachers, and how to be queer in the academy. They were both lesbian feminists at the University of Minnesota in a previous decade. One of them was Toni McNairn, who was one of the first out lesbian professors at the University of Minnesota. She was a Milton scholar, and she was one of the founders of the Women's Studies Department at Minnesota. So I actually took a class on Milton with her, and it was delightful, and she was wonderful. And in 1997, she published a book called Poisoned Ivy: Lesbian and Gay Academics Confronting Homophobia. And I think she probably wouldn't think of herself as a mentor to me, but what else is it when the chair of your dissertation committee sits across the table from you, nodding and smiling as you haltingly answer questions from other people on your committee who might be more interested in tearing you down than building you up? And I'll never forget her sort of calm and supportive presence, or the best piece of advice she ever gave me when I was trying to decide on a job offer. She simply said, "Go where you are wanted." And I have always remembered that, and it's always been a really clear uh, capsule of advice that I got from her. Years and years later, I had my first dean job in a small community college in Minnesota, where I was the only out gay member of the cabinet, but there were gay faculty members there, and I had known quite a few of them from a previous job. Then I moved to Southern California, and there was the provost who hired me was very interested in making sure that the new people, the new deans, there were a number of us, got really good mentoring. And her suggestion was to assigned me to someone who, one of the other gay people on the cabinet, who I eventually ended up thinking of in my head as the other gay dean. But he was there first, so I was probably that to him too. And I did not want to do that. I didn't want to be like, it wasn't, it just didn't feel, it felt kind of knee jerk to do that. And rather, I asked instead to have a mentor who was the previous incumbent in my job, so I could help do the job better. I thought by that time I knew, how to be an out gay administrator in a college, but what I didn't know how to do was do the job that I had been hired for. And so that ended up being a very fruitful relationship, and that mentor helped me through the first couple of years of that position. So there lots of different ways, but but I think both Kristin and I, and maybe a lot of you, our mentoring experience has been that kind of one-on-one um, relationship with either an older scholar or an older administrator who can help us through aspects of the position. Um, and 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 there are many other different models of mentoring um, than that, and that's what we're trying to establish here.
Yeah, I can share. I think in that vein, I think when we were creating this programming, I know that I've had a very close mentor uh, for 7, 8 years, and I think that what I learned in looking back at it, because it's kind of always hard to see when you're in it, is like there was so much time spent kind of quietly guiding me or with a light touch. And I think that that only could have been done by really learning who you're mentoring, really spending time to understand the person rather than just, oh, this is something that I think everybody goes through and you should go to it. It's like, okay, let me actually take time to understand this person and what they would like because as we mentioned, I many times it's not just the mentor that's gaining something from it too. It's I mean, excuse me, not the mentee. It's also the mentor. It's a symbiotic relationship. So I think that that's something that I really valued is this cultivating of care over time and not just like, okay, let's sit down and talk about your goals and where you're going to go and what you're going to do. It's like, let me understand you, get to know you, how you work as a team member, how we work together, and then we can really start to define what we think is best for you. And what I found to be so successful about that relationship was that many times it was done necessarily not even without me knowing of just like a quietly bringing me along or including me in a conversation that now as I look back I can see that that was done with intention but it doesn't have to be so explicit and it's really just cultivated such appreciation for your community and I think something that is has always stuck with me from that relationship is that anytime that I express gratitude or a thank you, it is always met with the comment of like, well, you'll do this for somebody else someday. You'll pass this skill set along and you'll be this to somebody else. And I think that's just a really important thing to remember that not only are you learning and building these relationships for you, it's like we need to continue to pass these lessons along to others. So we hope that this program is just the start of those kinds of relationships.
Does anybody else have a story they want to share?
I've got a part of one. I really
Okay.
connected. I really connected with the point, Kristen, that you made about your mentor just bringing you with them. I would say my first One of my first mentors was in my master's program, and she was a faculty member in a class I was taking, and I ended up reaching out to her to see how else I could get engaged in campus and in the program at the time. And she's like, "Oh, come be a grad intern for me," and she really became a mentor. She would take me to things like, the graduation retention council, where the deans and the VPs would be around the table, and I'd get to be around the table too. So I think that's a lot of where I learned about how I wanted to be an administrator was from her. And again, she brought me with her. She included me in, and that meant a lot.
I would just say the thing that excites me about this is I currently have in my position a very close one-on-one mentor, but that's really just specific for my institution and our own small liberal arts needs. And I'm finishing my PhD right now, and so looking in the horizon. And so a group mentor situation would definitely appeal to me as I'm looking at the next 5, 10 years. So this is great. Thank you.
And Matthew, don't you also mentor students?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, I think
I
that's
run a
what we're
musical
more
theater
used to,
program.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's what we're more used to as we're coming up through, usually through faculty ranks or student services ranks, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you think that's different?
Well, I think just as a teacher in general, my philosophy is we have a toolbox and we give a lot of tools out to people who need it. But sometimes we don't put tools back in the box for ourselves.
Hmm.
And so to me, it has to be that partnership, right? So for example, my dean is very much my mentor right now in this moment, as I am department chair and program directors of several areas. And so that's a really interesting way in which I get tools in my toolbox, but I still need more as I continue on and keep growing. So to me, I'm only going to be a better teacher if I'm also being mentored uh, in a correct or grounded way.
Right.
And also, I'm here because Richard Heldobler sent me. So hi. I interviewed him for my PhD program. We had to do a presidential interview, and so I interviewed him last summer. And he was like, "You should really check this out." And so I became a member, and here we are. So this is his fault. I'm here.
Yes, well, we'll thank him later. Richard is the outgoing past president of the board and the president at William Patterson University in New Jersey and a PhD in musical theater. So I'm not surprised by that one bit. Any other stories people want to share? Our next section was going to be about Q&A. So if people have questions about the program, either from the mentor point of view or the mentee point of view, now would be a good time, either in the chat or you can raise your hand or just speak up.
Yeah. I'd love to hear a little bit about why folks came here to this. Like, what are you thinking of in terms of mentoring or either being mentored or being mentored or being a mentor? Would love to hear a little bit about what drove you to this webinar and what you might be looking for in this experience.
I can begin.
Sure, Amy.
So I'm in a kind of second career, so that's why I do have a lot of mentor stories, but they're definitely from my past career, so not so relevant for our previous conversation. But I am I would say half out in my job, certainly out amongst my colleagues, not 100% out amongst the students, and really just looking to go. I'm an assistant dean in academic affairs, and so looking to broaden out of the. I think eventually, I work in a research an R1 private university, and so it's pretty large, and I think eventually I want to go into probably the public sector and help students that were more like me, like first gen, low income, that kind of thing, who need a little bit more help. So I think really that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for, is just help navigating that world and also living in the 2025 world that we're in right now. So yeah, hopefully I'm in the right forum.
Yeah, no, that's great, Amy. And there are lots of folks of us who are in the public sector and have been in the public sector for a while, as well as folks who are in private institutions, because how we're navigating this whole 2025 experience varies a lot depending on sort of where you are, what state you're in, whether you're in a research intensive, private, public. There's a whole, hot mess going on there. Yeah.
I think hot mess is a really diplomatic way of describing it.
I was being optimistic. And calm, right? Because calmness is important. Yeah.
I can say a word about what drew me here. So, hi everybody, Pete Smith. I serve as the Chief of Staff for Student Affairs at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I have the great good fortune of sitting on the campus leadership team as well. And as several of you said, it took a while to realize, like, oh, I am the only queer person here around these tables. It's a strange experience in such a giant place in Massachusetts, in like ultra liberal Massachusetts, in ultra liberal Western Massachusetts. I've had good mentors in the past for my professional life who have contributed to how I show up in the world as a professional. And I feel like the things that you learn first, you learn through the dominant identities. So I actually know how to be a good straight white dude administrator because that's what I learned. I don't have any examples of how to be a powerful, confident, queer higher ed administrator, and so I am making it up. It's always navigation, right? Like, and it's something, sometimes it's very serious, like the identities I hold inform the things I advocate for in my role. And other times it's like, oh shoot, I've got to meet with the athletic director later. Like, am I dressed like a boy? Right? Things like that. I feel like there are so many topics that you never get any instruction on, and don't even really have a peer group to bounce ideas off of. And so I interact with lots of the young professionals in my division. We've got about 400 full-time staff in the division, and I try to be as out and sort of visible as I can for the people below me, but I can't talk to the other people in my division about the experience I'm having because they report up to me, right? And so it's just like, where do you be vulnerable? How do you where do you talk about the real things? So that's what brought me here, what I'm interested in, what I'm curious about, and looking for.
Yeah, Pete, thank you for that. I have to say, I'm in the really fortunate position of reporting as a chancellor to a lesbian president, and that has never happened to me before, right? So it changes, right? Permission to be kind of more authentic. So I think that's a really rich place to have conversations around, what does it mean to represent, and how do you represent yourself in a university or a college where you may or may not be the only one, or where you may or may not be accepted. So there's lots of layers there. Yeah.
And we've seen at our National Leadership Institute how some of our younger colleagues earlier in their careers are navigating that kind of expectation. In my last position, it was a suit and tie kind of place, and I have not worn a tie since I left that position. And to see how our younger colleagues are coming, bringing their authentic self to the Leadership Institute anyway, and I can vet pretty much to their own institutions and their positions. Things are changing out there. And you probably see it among your younger student affairs colleagues too. So I think I'm just so despite the hot mess we're in, um, I'm just so encouraged by seeing the variety of gender expressions and professional presentations that our younger colleagues have. Kirby,
Like
did you
I'm a
want
younger
to? Oh, go
colleague,
ahead.
so
Oh, hey, Jamie.
hi. Like I'm a younger colleague, so I will share. No, um, Jamie Kent. So I am in the School of Teacher Education at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. So even earlier than others. But we're in a transitional time in which I have currently a somewhat temporary leadership position, being mentored by others amidst the chaos. And being on an island is literally isolating. And our system is small, and the way that our leadership trajectory will look will all be insular to this one institution. And so part of why I was so interested to come out to you all is because you can't share everything in a system where things are isolated. It's small. You share with one person what happened at work and it will spread very quickly. And any incident that might happen or discomfort could stop your entire career because there are no other major universities anywhere in the state. So we're one system. So I was that's kind of what brought me out, is a space to speak openly, and to connect. I also am someone who was raised on the continent. So I was raised in Ohio and have family in Florida. And although now this 2025 nightmare has started to impact us, I'm someone who's experiencing it twofold because I have my family who experience it firsthand on the mainland in two really rough places, while being in Hawaii that kind of gets a delayed response. So I think the other part of being queer in this setting is in Hawaii, folks don't always, I think, there's an assumed protection that frankly is no longer true. So already being here today has been lovely to hear other folks sharing their experiences. So thank you.
Thank you.
I can share why I'm here. Jamie Pita. I've been in various forms of higher ed administration for a while, but I'm also a psychologist, and in psychology we have this sort of funny director of clinical training um, uh, role that is an administrative role, but it also oversees the clinical training for the students, but it also often has this administrative leadership piece that is bigger or smaller depending on the kind of school you are. And so it's a really unusual sort of place. And I've been lucky to get a lot of really meaningful mentorship as part of my grad degree, and then also a little bit in the beginnings of my career in the director of clinical training field. But recently moved to a really small little psychology institute, the Wright Institute in Berkeley, California. Um, and it's so small and has done things its own way in ways that are so disconnected from the other schools I've been at, like from just sort of the norms of higher education, that I often find myself in these strange positions of being like, why are we doing things this way? And it's also right now very embattled. The administration is extremely embattled. So there's not really space for me to get any mentorship from the people who are above me. They're both have been there for a very long time. They're both in their 70s and 80s, like cis straight. white men who see themselves as sort of outgoing. And so it's very difficult for me to sort of figure out how to get a foothold and be out queer, trans in this tiny place that isn't quite sure how it's going to reorganize itself. So that's why I'm here. I'm really excited just um, to see you all and meet you. And already I feel like, okay, maybe I could figure this out.
I really do think we're in such a fast moving, I mean, literally, I check the news 3 times a day to see how the landscape has shifted. And I think more than ever, we really need to be sharing stories, problem solving, venting, finding hope, encouraging each other more than at any other time I can think of. And I feel like I've been in this business for a really, really long time, and we really need each other more than at any other point that I can remember.
Yeah, we really conceived of this program last year, over the last year and a half, I guess, primarily about mentoring, but at the same time, as conditions have changed, we've been hearing more and more from our membership about the need for community building.
Yeah.
We'll be doing a series of virtual events over the next several months that are really dedicated to community building in one way or another. We might have some regional focuses, we might have some affinity groups. We're working that out. I wonder, Kirby, if you want to share the results of that poll, that totally scientific poll we did on LinkedIn.
As a research methodologist, I have to say, I'm sure it was really scientific.
Yeah, it was very scientific. Let me pull it up. We did ask 2 questions, just like to get the lay of the land, which obviously I think we've kind of discussed here of, you know, what their pulse is on mentoring. So we asked the first question of have you benefited from mentoring in your career? Tell us how much you have, and then join us today. And of course, to no surprise, a lot of people said that they have benefited a lot. And so with that, we kind of wanted to ask a follow-up question of, what do you believe is the most significant benefit of mentoring programs for LGBTQ plus individuals in higher ed? And it was really interesting to see, like, obviously everybody, not everybody, but most people want to be a part of a mentoring relationship in one way or another. But it's interesting to see where things lie in sense of like why they're going to that. It seemed that these bottom two of expanding your professional network and a stronger community and belonging seem to be the standouts. I think that the top 2 options almost come in after you do those second or the bottom 2. So I think all these things go hand in hand. But it's just interesting what people seek out mentoring opportunities for. And obviously, given what everybody shared today, I think that stronger community, sense of belonging, having a space with someone that you say, this is kind of what I'm going through. I'm not sure how to navigate it. Have you been here before? What advice do you have? Can we problem solve together? Just knowing that you have somebody that you can do that with, a space that you can do that with, just goes a really long way. So I think this kind of supports, it's scientific in the fact that you all were supporting evidence today of these things. So just thought we would take a second to share those, see if anyone had any thoughts.
Personally, right? Representation matters, period. Doesn't matter to me what you think representation is, but it matters, which is why I have like an inclusive flag on my door, which is why like I'm one of the only out gay faculty members on my campus. But to me, it is not only creating my network network of people, but being representative in this level of management and continuing on. Because to me, when I first started, teaching's always been in my career, but I went from Broadway to here, so this is a really different transition. And so where is queer leadership in higher ed? And I couldn't find it to start until I found Richard, and then now I found it, which is great, but I want to continue that, right? So if that means that it gets a professional network, it helps me get to the next level of my career. And if it also allows me to impact my teaching, impact my students, and also be a mentor in the process to, my adjunct faculty members who want to come up in this world as well, like any of that, to me, it's a win-win regardless. So of those like four questions and those four answers, to me, it's sort of equitable because they all feed off of each other in that way. And as someone who's doing research right now, those questions were, I would have died to see IRB on that, but that's okay.
Any final questions or thoughts from people before we wrap up? We've got about a few minutes available.
Yeah, I was wondering, for the 90-minute meetings, how are they scheduled?
They will be scheduled once we know who the participants are, but probably once a month or once every 3 weeks for that 3-month period.
So just sort of wondering about, I have a job during the day, and sometimes I teach often in the evenings, and so is that going to be a problem for meeting, as it were? I mean, is it going to be organized according to everybody's schedules, or is it going to be a specific date that you can attend?
My hope is that the groups are small enough. We're starting with a group of 5 or 6 people with a facilitator, so 7 tops. My hope is that it's easy enough to schedule where everybody can be accommodated. If that's not the case, then maybe the next iteration or the next cohort would be the best, depending on some people have a lot of open time in the summer. I won't say it's free time because I know everybody works anyway. There might be teaching less in the summer or teaching less in the fall. So that's why we're going to do cohorts basically every 3 months. But we'll do our best with the timing with the people that are in the first cohort, in each cohort.
Great, thank you.
But you remind us of how difficult it is to schedule 7 people on a Zoom call all at once. Well, the last thing I wanted to do was announce our next virtual opportunity. As I mentioned, we're doing some virtual events that are really aimed at community building. Some of our webinars are content rich, very specific to a topic, and then we're also doing these other virtual events that are more about community building, having conversations. And so the next one is happening on May 2nd with one of our board members, Jillian McKnight-Tutin, and she is the Chief Diversity Officer for the Colorado State Department of Education. Has had other leadership roles in higher education, both in Colorado and in other states. And this is about queer leadership and career development in higher education. I attended a really interesting panel a couple of days ago about how to advance your career and stay authentic to yourself and true to your values. And I think this will be another conversation about that kind of the spot that we find ourselves in these days, even before 2025 happened. So we'll put the link in the chat there. It is free, but registration through Zoom is required. And I'll repeat, Kirby, could you repeat the link to the mentoring site? If you go to our website, trying to make it a little bit easier to navigate, but the mentoring site is in the menu under programs. And we also encourage you, if you're not currently a member, to become a member. We are developing more programs over over 2025 after we have gotten a generous contribution, a generous grant from the Mellon Foundation for the next 3 years. That involves our mentoring program, that involves the Leadership Institute, and helps to strengthen us as an organization. So we are able to offer more year-round programming now than we have ever in the past. And so we're very excited about all of those things that are happening. And some of those things will be free for members, and some of them will have substantial discounts for members. Kristin, did you want to say any last words?
I guess all I'll say is just really thanks so much for being here today, and thanks for sharing your stories, and just persist, and we will get through this. I feel really confident we will get through this, but we'll get through it because we're connecting with each other, we're supporting each other, and we're finding ways to navigate this time period that we are in. So really glad to see you, and really glad to be in your community with you. So thanks.